Hello, I'm Ajahn Sona. Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery live stream. And we have an opportunity for questions and answers. And let us begin, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question is from the live stream from Brittany in Florida, United States. I was wondering how to work with nimittas once it fully arises. Do we let it pass like normal phenomena or investigate into its nature, anicca, dukkha, anatta?
Well, for the general audience, I want to define this word nimitta. Nimitta has a wide usage. In fact, the building we are videoing in and filming in is called Nimitta House because we make images. We make virtual reality kind of here. Nimittas are mind-made phenomena that arise in meditation. Sometimes they arise outside of meditation. So strange things are seen within the mind. Symbolic representations, representations of bright and wholesome things, and also negative, dark things. So this is, in brief, what nimittas are. And one of the most featured is that which arises in an attempt to attain samadhi, or deep concentration. So while you're sitting there watching your breath, certain mind-made counter-images arise. And there's quite a bit of confusion around this as well. Actually, I have written an essay many years ago, decades ago, in fact, called The Mystery of the Breath Nimitta, which explores the commentarial ideas of this image, this mind-made image that arises in the mind when practicing particularly breath meditation, and how the description of it changes over the centuries and becomes a featured element of the knowledge of whether you're actually in a state of concentration or not. Now, I have some critical remarks on this, on the nimitta. So if you're interested, find that. It's on Birken Forest Monastery website. But it's fairly technical, and so if you're just a beginner meditator and so forth, you don't need to read it. But if you are influenced by commentarial ideas, and quite a few monastic teachers who are influenced by commentaries, feature this idea of nimittas and so forth. So it might be worth your while to read that essay if you're a serious meditator and trying to understand the nimittas. Now, should you investigate the nimitta or not? Well, there's a lot of assumptions around what the nature of the nimitta is. If you're doing serenity meditation, concentration meditation, then you shouldn't be investigating the nimitta. The nimitta, just let me try to make this more sensible in English. The mind produces an after image of an experience, an impression. So you can have a physical experience, like say you're out in the wind for half an hour, you're walking in the park and the wind is blowing against your face. And then you come inside and you might have an after image, which is mental, a mental after image, which the mind forms, and it feels like the wind is still blowing against your face. Or if you've just got off a boat, sailboat or something that's rocking and you might have spent weeks on this sailboat. When you get off on the dock, you have the sailor's walk. So it feels like the solid ground is actually swaying still. Or if you've been riding a horse and you get off to walk, you feel like you feel bow-legged. So this is the after image of an experience. And it's a mental post-impression. The sort of qualities of the mental state arise, and this is poets notice all the time. Like if you come out of a depressed period, everything seems bright and shiny, and you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. So why do they say you are my sunshine? They're talking about a Nimita. So a person that you feel very safe and happy around brightens up your life, and you literally feel, a sense of brightness that's visual and emotional. So this is what a Nimita is. So the Nimita is more or less success in the mind focusing on a single topic. And the topic could be the breath. It could be loving kindness. So when you feel a profound feeling of loving kindness, that's the Nimita, that's the impression, the emotional body and mind impression of it. And you carry that mark, that characteristic feeling of loving kindness around with you. And it's not a matter of investigating it or anything like this. However, you can be aware and not surprised if it fades away and doesn't last. It came into existence, and therefore it can fade out of existence. That awareness, more or less, shouldn't necessarily interfere. It doesn't need to. You don't need to switch the object and lose the Nimita by switching to an investigative mode. So that, in brief, is all I can say for now. But try not to if you're practicing serenity meditation and samadhi, concentration, then don't interfere with it by introducing any activities, analytical activities of mind. Just enter it, strengthen it, get familiar with it, learn how to enter it quickly, how to sustain it, and then you can address the idea of its impermanent nature as well afterwards. That's in brief for now.
Our next question is from Anonymous in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. In the Jhana Sutta, it is said that Venerable Jhana, after suffering with chronic pain, ended his life. Later in the sutta, it is revealed that Jhana slit his wrists, quote, blamelessly, because he laid down this body without taking up another. Does this imply that Jhana was an arahant? And if so, why would he feel compelled to end his life in the midst of great physical pain?
This is a controversial case. It comes up. It's an example of a monk. Jhana is a monk, and Jhana was pronounced an arahant, which is a fully enlightened saint, the fourth stage of the process of enlightenment, fully enlightened after his death by the Buddha. So the Buddha visits this monk who had apparently committed suicide. And he had taken his own life. Now, there is something called a Vinaya, which means the rules of conduct and discipline for monks. And it is an offense to take your own life. And it is a significant offense as well. And for instance, taking the life of another human being is a disrobing offense. So your monastic life is terminated if you deliberately take the life, kill another person intentionally. And so that's a termination. Now, if you take your own life, what is the penalty? Well, obviously, after you're dead, we can't disrobe you. So all of the offenses take place before you complete the act of killing yourself. And this level of offense is called a dukkata, or a wrongdoing. And it begins when you search for a weapon to do it. So when Jhana searched for a weapon, a razor blade or a knife to slit his wrist or his throat, whatever it was, right then he is committing a wrongdoing. And then when he go through every motion through the act is also another wrongdoing. So he would have to have been doing a whole series of wrongdoings that have no exemption under the Vinaya. And so, and if he's an arahant already, then he is by nature not inclined to break these Vinaya rules. So I am doubtful that he was an arahant, and it's possible that certainly he had an irrecoverable illness, an irreversible illness. So this is a topic for our times when, again, the entire society has sort of changed the view, because recently, suicide was unacceptable under all circumstances, even if you had irrecoverable illnesses that were very severe. And in Pao, there is this various kinds of assisted death, and it's legalized and all this stuff. So in the time of the Buddha did not find suicide acceptable, and there are karmic results from it. So Jhana, so the Buddha declared after the man had died, he said he was an arahant. And so it's possible that he achieved it after he had cut his wrists and he was dying, that it's possible that he had attained enlightenment at that time, the arahant state at that time, after doing that. So he would have attained arahantship after initiating that process. That's a possibility. What remains is that it's clear, and there are no exceptions. So there, in the Vinaya, they articulate, they don't exempt arahants from taking their own lives. The rule for that it's a wrongdoing to initiate the procedure and to carry the procedure out, it applies to all monks without exceptions. And so that is the case for arahants as well. And it seems, though, that the arahant is useful up to a certain point in their lives. Why do they remain at all? Why don't they just meditate and drift off into death? They have nothing more to accomplish. It's because they can help. They can be an example to others. They can teach, etc. But if you have irreversible illness, then you are no good to anybody else, and the body is suffering. The arahant is said not to suffer psychologically. So even though they have grave illness, they are not in a state of despair or great depression or any of these things. They experience the body as it is. Then we ask, well, why would Jhana want to escape the pain of the illness? He may not have, but he is of no use to anybody. In fact, he might have considered himself something of a burden on the Sangha, because other monks would be obliged by Vinaya to take care of another monk until he die. And that takes materials and resources and human labor and time to care for them. But that's about the only example I can think of it, which is questionable whether it's suicide by an arahant. So I would leave it as a questionable thing and not as something that be clear and followed as an example, especially anybody who is less than finished with the project of enlightenment. So suicide in Buddhism is not a hugely heavy resultant. The karmic results of suicide is that one tends to incline towards it again. So even if you attempt suicide, one of the things you see with people who attempt suicide is that they might attempt it many times. They don't always succeed, but there's a compulsion to try it again. So when you injure yourself, you set down a a tendency to do it again. And that can persist even into the next life. So you might kill yourself as a human, and then in the next life you're reborn as a human. So you're not. Some of the religions imagine that you're cast down into hell and so forth, but Buddhism doesn't imagine that. It's possible that you may take rebirth as a human, but be an odd sort of underlying compulsion or tendency to want to terminate your life again. And so that has to be overcome. So that's in brief a little synopsis of the nature of suicide and the rules for monks as well. Yeah.
This next question is from the live feed from Kent. Ajahn, to what extent could dementia undo one's hard-won progress on the path? It seems that Dhamma would be forgotten and delusion would proliferate, but surely one's good karma would remain intact.
Yes, I would say that Alzheimer's, the sense, the recognition of your situation and so forth can degenerate. And even if you're a practitioner, it's possible to get the Alzheimer's. But the basic character that you've established remains. So a lack of fear. So not everybody who has Alzheimer's is in a state of fear and confusion. Just like if a person is traveling in a foreign country or being lost in the woods. So not everybody who's lost in the woods is terrified and lose their mind. Some have a nature to be calm and collected, even when you don't know where you are and don't know what the situation is, in the midst of wars, in the midst of violence, in the midst of being lost, in the midst of a new culture, in the midst of you just going off to university and going into a class that you don't understand very well. Some students will panic and have all kinds of side effects and paranoia and self-doubts, and others, even though they may not understand the subject, they feel confident and relaxed. And so if that practice is developed, even in the midst of Alzheimer's, there's not a sudden change of personality. When you see Alzheimer patients experiencing fear and paranoia and confusion and so forth, that is perhaps their underlying personality, not their underlying personality, as long as they're in familiar situations and recognize people and imagine that situation's stable. As soon as you pull them out of that, which Alzheimer's does, they become panicky. But if you're well practiced, then that panic won't arise. You will just not remember who you're talking to. You won't recognize them, or you won't recognize your own daughter or son or wife, perhaps. But you're not flustered by the experience. So yes, the practice is not wiped away by the fact that you're temporarily out of sorts. This happens under drugs as well. It happens in sleep and dreams. You go to sleep someplace, you're traveling around the world, you wake up, if it's Tuesday, this must be Hungary, so you wake up there and you forget, I don't know where I am. But some people panic and other people, so no problem, I'll figure it out. So this is the underlying personality remains. Okay, Pia, let's talk about next one.
Next question is from Lee in Halifax, West Yorkshire, England. I find it easier and more enjoyable to focus on a mantra than the breath. In your opinion, is this still a good form of practice?
Yes, mantra can be used, and quite often, particularly in Thailand, one of the mantras there for many of the lay people is simply the word Buddho. So 2 syllables. The O on the end of Buddha is just a different form of the Pali. So nominative form of the Buddha. So Buddho, Buddho. And they can carry that around during the day while they're washing dishes and sweeping the floor and doing their tasks, and it keeps them centered on the nature of the Buddha. So that's quite often the most frequently given meditation subject for lay people, and anybody can, even a child can take it up, and it kind of centers you. So that seems to be an accepted form. You don't necessarily find that in the texts, in the suttas, but there is an advocacy of recalling or remembering the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And this is called Buddha Nusati, mindfulness of the Buddha, mindfulness of the Dhamma, mindfulness of the Sangha. And so you're kind of keeping them in mind. And so it might be accompanied by the word Buddho, or Dhamma, Sangha. Any of these things can, if you're a certain type of personality, it works for you, so it's all right, yeah.
Our next question is from the live feed. It's from Laura in Spain. During my last metta session, my mind was completely taken away by the great love generated, completely drenched in piti. But this sensation stopped, and I found myself in a vast room full of equanimity. It was very difficult to get back to the metta, so I stayed there. It was an imperturbable state of balance that lasted for a few hours. Does this sound like the first, second, or third jhana? If so, should I continue striving with metta beyond that point of equanimity, or simply try to deepen the calm?
Well, both metta and upekkha, so metta means loving kindness or friendliness, profound, unconditional friendliness for all beings. And equanimity, the Pali word for equanimity is upekkha. So it's a state of exquisite balance of the mind. It's not troubled by the varieties of the worldly experience of praise and blame and good fortune and bad fortune and obscurity and fame and all of these various polarities of the world. The winds, they call them the 8 worldly winds. You're not blown around by them. Equanimity is a stability of personality. There are a number of types of equanimity. And one type is based strictly on serenity meditation or concentration meditation. And that is, you're in deep stillness and you're in profound sense of stillness, but you're not moving around or thinking. And that's based on concentration. And the other type is based on wisdom, and it functions in the middle of going to the grocery store, dealing with the clerk, talking to people, being in the midst of difficult situations. Your balance remains in the midst of the flurry of change which you're seeing around you. And so that's another type of equanimity or balance. Both of them are extremely valuable, very high developments. And so the wisdom equanimity is a kind of philosopher's equanimity. And you'll see this characteristic praised as well in other philosophies, like the Greek philosophers are equanimous in the midst of of wars and difficult situations, being brought before the courts and all of this kind of thing. And so all of those are valuable. One of them is based on wisdom. The other one is based on a deep capacity for the mind to sustain concentration. Both are delicious. Both are praiseworthy. And if you manage to get to equanimity, feel free to abide in it for as long as you can, to specialize in it. And but if you wish to practice loving kindness, it is also a divine experience, also praised throughout the world. These two, loving kindness is warm, equanimity is cool, not cold, but cool. And so, in fact, you can have both at the same time. You can have a warm heart and a cool head. So I think you should focus on keeping your head cool all the time. Don't overheat it. And the heart should be warm all the time. So I give the analogy of when you're sleeping in a cold climate, you pull your comforter right up to your neck, but don't pull it over your head. And leave the window open a crack so you get some nice cool fresh air coming in. So your head is abiding in fresh, cool air, and your body is covered by the quilt and is kept warm. Very, very nice. So this is the warmth of loving kindness and the cool, spacious balance of equanimity. These two emotions can be maintained at the same time. They locate themselves in various parts of the body. The loving kindness in the heart area and the equanimity in the head area. Okay, so let's go ahead.
Our next question is from Ina in Kiel, Germany. Dear Ajahn Sona, it is often discussed if human beings are free in their decisions or if there is something like a, quote, free will. How much freedom do we have according to Buddhism in our choices? What role does karma play? And does the degree of freedom change as we develop on the path?
So you philosophical types out there, I'm sure some of you been to Philosophy 101, the first thing they'll bring up is the possibility of free will, and they'll show you logically that it's impossible. But and then at the end of that, they'll ask everybody put up your hand if you think you have zero free will, and then nobody will put up their hand. So there's a problem between what logic appears to point to, and that is that every event must have a cause, and if it has a cause, it is caused by a previous event, etc. So the entire universe is predictable because everything, all effects are preceded by specific causes, and the effect must follow. So that's a theory that suddenly dawned on people when in the age of physics, and also in religious teachings, right back to the time of the Buddha. So there are philosophers at the time of the Buddha who said, all your decisions and so forth are illusions. You don't have any freedom of choice. You are a completely predetermined creature. The Buddha rejected that. He also rejected the fact that you're completely free. He said you're conditioned, but not determined. So this is important, and he gets very much onto this with the sixth factor of the path, which is called right effort. And he says to the monks, O monks, you can make effort. If you could not make effort, I would not say make effort. But because you can make effort, O monks, I say, therefore, make effort. And you are to, this is the really freeing thing, is this doctrine. You know, in more or less the Christian West, you're supposed to have free will, but nothing you do can save you somehow. You need Jesus or grace or something, God, to save you. But from a Buddhist point of view, no. You don't need Jesus or God or anybody else to save you. In fact, nobody else can save you. You must make the effort yourself. And the effort, you are not predetermined. So you do have some ability to change your mind. And so this is called right effort. To abandon unwholesome mental states, emotional states, and to bring into being and sustain positive mental and emotional states. And this is done by effort. Right effort, not just any effort, and it's not just hard work, it's just skillful effort. And you need to investigate what are the skills that allow you to change your mind. And when you change your mind, you will find that you develop habit structures. And so once you develop these wholesome mental states, they tend to self-perpetuate. So they become easier and easier and easier. Now, we do this in all areas of life. We do this in sports. We practice again and again. And nobody thinks God just makes baseballs fly through the air. It's practice. And the right kind of practice. So you get a better coach and they change your technique and things go better. And same with music and art and all literature, and everything can be practiced and skills can be developed. So in the practical world, we know this and we do this. And meditation is the emotional world and the mental world. So you learn to do this in the emotional and mental world. So the Buddha is what we would call a pragmatic philosopher. He says, look, we darn well know that when we practice things, including our emotional structures, it changes. And so we don't have to get into the weeds on logical propositions which cut sharply against the common sense nature of the fact that we are making choices. So yes, on a strictly logical basis, it seems to be a convincing argument that we have no free will whatsoever, but in practical matters, it seems everybody completely ignores that, bypasses that as a curious quirk of logic, and that in reality and in the pragmatic life of humans, which overrides these things, we go about our business making choices.
Our next question is from the live feed from Laura. Ajahn, I am curious about the relationship between antidepressants and kamma. My understanding is that they can be beneficial, but limited as they leave one's underlying tendencies untouched. Thoughts?
Yes, I think that antidepressants apparently, I've never tried an antidepressant, so I'm not speaking from experience here. So, and I'm not going to overstep the boundaries and act as if I'm a psychiatrist or a doctor or something like this. It may be very important for some people to take antidepressants, but certainly both before, during, and after this process, if you have depression, you should seek association with the wise. You should seek counseling with a well-qualified spiritual person, and not all spiritual advisors are competent or anything. I mean, I can't recommend just any religion or any structure because there's all kinds of crackpot stuff, harmful stuff. I can't just recommend any psychiatrist or any psychologist either. They're not all out of the same cookie cutter. So, but I can say that good advice from a thoughtful Buddhist advisor perhaps can push you along to alleviate depression, and that eventually one may be able to get off medications and not have a recurrence of depression. But as I say, I feel like I could give you good advice, but I can't speak for anybody else. I mean, I don't know who to recommend as an advisor. But there are, I'm sure, many good advisors out there. I can't just list them off or say who it is. But not everybody, including in the medical profession, says sensible things about this, sensible attitudes to life. So that's the way it is. Look for good advisors.
Our next question is from Neil in Elgin, Moray, Scotland. Ajahn Sona, how do I work with heartfelt romantic feelings I have for a friend and still remain friends? Is that possible? And is there a lot of ego or self in this dynamic?
Well, it's not exactly news. People fall in love all the time. I mean, romantic love is not a bad thing, as long as you remain a friend. As long as you keep up the friendship, that's fine. I mean, it's just human nature. If you want to become a monk, I advise you not to fall in love. So you can be very friendly, but not obsessed. And but if you're a layperson, it's just part of nature, and a lot of people seem to celebrate it. It has its downsides. I mean, if it's not returned, then you can quite often feel very despondent. If it's one-sided romance, It has its dangers, but it's not a terrible thing to be in love, and it's not necessarily egotistic. It's just natural, and if you can't fall in love and you can't feel friendly, there's something wrong with you. That's more of a tragedy than people who fall in love. If you can't just really absorb and be interested in another person at all, then something of a lack, isn't it? So there are various levels of love, and romantic is one, and then brotherly love, and then sort of love for the entire planet is another level, and the highest level is this cosmopolitan or loving kindness, universal loving kindness. Yeah. Okay.
Our next question is from the live feed from John in Toronto, Canada. Ajahn, once someone implements a meditation routine, is it ever necessary to take a break to avoid meditating, quote, too much? Or do breaks defeat what we are trying to accomplish?
Well, yes, I think if you're trying to do this on your own, you're trying to amateur it, and quite often in the West, I mean, if there aren't suitable temples on every corner and suitable life coaches and spiritual coaches and everything, and so you undertake these things, and if you're a determined person, many people are, they run ultra marathons, and they work 18 hours a day and stuff. They're amazing kind of determination and so forth, and if you're just going on your own guidance, yeah, you could probably overdo it sometimes, and you can overdo it on the wrong topic, or to sustain it too much in the wrong way. So it's not that you need to take a break from meditation. You need to perhaps balance it out with other forms and types of meditation and activities, changing posture. So the Buddha talks about loving kindness is done in 4 postures: walking, standing, sitting, and lying down. And so if you believe that meditation only takes place in the full lotus position, sitting there, then it might be excessive if you sit too long, and you need to carry this into all of your life, even into sleep itself. So you need to find a variety, a handful of different positive emotional attitudes that you can cycle through, and that work with each other and support each other, etc. So it's a general thing. And if you suspect that you're going backwards, you're overdoing it, that you actually might be overdoing it. And this is the advantage of being going to visit a mature and competent spiritual teacher and talking with them, etc. And by the way, there's lots of spiritual traditions out there, and even in the Buddhist world, who are, I don't think, they're advocating for almost anybody walking in off the street to do things that are narrow and excessive and not necessarily good for everybody's mental health. And this is starting to catch up with some meditation schools and systems in the modern world. Some people are not getting good results, and they're put into semi-states of sometimes loss of reality and psychosis. And they have to go and visit psychologists and so forth. And the psychologists saying, this meditation is it's driving people crazy. It's not helpful. So not all these schools of meditation are balanced and wise. And quite often it can easily be excessive. And so you can't just hand your mind over to anybody or any school, or anybody even wearing a robe or anything. It's just not. Things go off the rails sometimes. And so you have to have a certain sense of judgment about this. I mean, this happens, think about private schools or school regimens in the 19th century and what they had children doing and beating children and so forth, and everybody thought it was they must know what they're doing, but they didn't know what they're doing, and now we think, geez, that's very destructive. So we can't just trust the authorities. We have to examine and question. Yeah.
Our next question is from Sumana in Whitecourt, Alberta, Canada. Dear Ajahn, I am wondering if you are familiar with the book Focused and Fearless by Shayla Catherine. If so, what is your sense of this book as a guide in developing samadhi practice?
I have only briefly heard of her, and she's a disciple of Pa Ok Sayadaw, a Burmese monk, and I have heard about his techniques, and he's an interesting Burmese monastic teacher, and quite respected. There are two main schools, it seems. Well, there used to be just sort of one main school in Burma, which is the roots of what was called the Vipassana schools, and Mahasi Sayadaw and other Burmese monks developed these Vipassana techniques, and it tended to be, the emphasis there was away from samadhi, or deep concentration, kind of a deliberate avoidance of this. So I must define this word vipassana. You will hear this word quite often. All it means is to see clearly. Pasana is to see, and vi is like very see. You see clearly. You really see. And it doesn't mean anything more than that, but it's been developed into a whole sort of specific technique derived from some of the teachings of the Buddha, with certain setting aside certain other techniques that the Buddha talks about, etc. And it comes out of the Burmese schools, which are heavily influenced by what are called Abhidhamma. Abhidhamma is the last section of the Tipitaka, the three baskets of the Buddhist teachings. The discipline and rules for monks and nuns are one, and they're called the Vinaya. The second one are the suttas, or the discourses, the preserved teachings of the Buddha and a few of his disciples, which he approved of, and they're preserved as suttas. And you may have heard the word sutra, but the early ones are called suttas. And the third basket is called Abhidhamma, which is more or less the higher teachings, or the more abstract teachings. And it is quite apparent from them that these are developed after the time of the Buddha. They're often attributed to the Buddha himself historically, but there's no evidence that they were recited during the Buddha's lifetime or at the first council after the Buddha's death, but that they developed over the next few centuries by very clever and smart monks who were taking the teachings of the Buddha apart and putting them together like the table of elements. And so it's a very a remarkable and impressive collection, but other schools of Buddhism have different abhidhammas. So you see the suttas are more or less the same, the rules, conduct are more or less the same, but each school develops its own abhidhamma. And Burma, in particular, is highly influenced by this. Not all Theravada countries and monastics are influenced by Abhidhamma, but Burma is very, and that's how that Vipassana type practice comes out of that Abhidhamma. She is influenced by Pa Ok Sayadaw, who kind of it's revised Burmese Buddhism, because he believes that one should cultivate strong jhana first. Jhana is the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path. It's the samadhi, concentration, and that he feels like one should first do that and then go on to vipassana-type practices. And this is a bit of an upstart. This is a bit contrary to the tendencies in vipassana schools, where they practices, and especially jhana practices, as a distraction from immediate getting on with enlightenment. So she seems to be following that, and that's quite a revolution in Burmese practice. And this occurred only, he's not that old. Yeah, I don't think he's probably not as old as I am. Anyway, it's a revolution. It's a restoration, and I'm glad that some Burmese monks are restoring and respecting the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path. However, the type of instructions that I've heard from Pa Auk Sayadaw regarding the development of the jhanas, and probably, I can't say for sure, but probably followed by what's her name? Shayla Catherine. Probably followed, since she's a disciple of his. The descriptions of jhana are primarily influenced by a very late commentary called the Visuddhimagga, the Path of Purification. And that is 1,000 years after the time of the Buddha, and it's very influential in the Theravada world. The fact that it's so influential and so forth, many monks regard it as the word of the Buddha, or canonical, but it isn't. It is a commentary, and it's developed by monks much later. And it is developed by later schools. And so the types of advice that appear in describing how to develop jhana, how to recognize whether you're in the jhana, etc., are not exactly the descriptions you find in the suttas by the Buddha, the historical Buddha. And again, if you want to know the details, some of my objections to this are in this essay that I wrote 25 years ago called The Mystery of the Breath Nimita. It's on our website, and it's floating around in cyberspace as well. But it is a critical look at the descriptions of the signs that so-called appear when entering jhana on the breath, etc. So I have critiqued it from a historian's point of view. I've looked at earlier commentaries and the suttas, and I show systematically, not just sweeping it aside, I show how the descriptions of this characteristic sign of entering concentration has changed over the centuries and seems perhaps to have gone off the track by the 5th century AD. That's 1,000 years after the Buddha. The Buddha is 5th century BC, and 1,000 years later, the Visuddhimagga. Now, Pa Auk Sayadaw seems to be modeling his definition of jhana on that, and Shayla is perhaps following that. I'm not too sure about that, but when you read that, maybe you want to consider trying to read that essay as well as a comment on this structure. Okay, yeah.
Our next question is live from David. Dear Ajahn, would you offer any advice or warnings to a long-time lay hermit, drunk on serenity and aloneness?
Well, congratulations. Serenity is praiseworthy. If you are intoxicated by serenity, congratulations. And when you say aloneness, it has many possible meanings in English. The Buddha always praised the desire for solitude and the appreciation of solitude. But we have this word lonely in English, and lonely in the 18th century or 17th century, the word lonely didn't mean that you were craving company. It meant that you were alone. So a lonely tree just meant a tree that was alone, a solitary tree. Solitude, aloneness, lonely. But it starts to take on a meaning later on in English, which means that you are feeling isolated and you wish for company, but you can't have company because you can't get to them or something like this. So if your sense of if you're appreciating aloneness or solitude, that is praiseworthy. And if you are enjoying yourself in solitude and serenity, good on you. Wonderful. Nothing to be feared there. We have all kinds of strange commentary in our society that there's something to be feared in being alone. Like actually an adult who can't be alone is something to fear. A person who relies on company all the time is undeveloped. They need to develop themselves so they feel fine when they're alone. You know? So your association with others is voluntary and not neediness. So if you feel complete and well, congratulations. From time to time, you will have to associate with others, and you shouldn't be in a state of paranoia or stress when you are in association with others. That means that your so-called solitude is more or less based on a little paranoia. But if you're fine alone and you're okay with others, that's the right balance. Okay. So perhaps we have one more question here.
Okay. Ajahn, our final question is from Erland in Nordland, Norway. Dear Ajahn, I am wondering why chanting in some traditions is so monotonous, while more melodic in others. Is it important for lay practitioners to stick to a certain kind, or is that more for monastics?
Well, chanting is merely the tonality of the chanting is cultural, and in modern Thailand, probably in the last 150 years, there's a tendency to chant on a single note, so monotonic chanting or monotonous chanting. And if you go to Sri Lanka, you'll hear more melodic type of chanting. The Buddha, there is no indication of that changing the pitch of your voice is wrong in chanting. The Buddha didn't want the monks to do opera, so a syllable, the idea is that one note per syllable and not long, elaborate flourishes on a single syllable. There's nothing forbidding monks from changing the pitch of their voice while they chant, because especially in Thailand, it's very strange because the Thai language is tonal, and you can't be understood in Thai unless you change the pitch of your voice. So there's 5 tones in the Thai language. And then when you go to the monasteries and hear the monks chant, they chant on one note in Pali. But in Thai, when they chant in Thai, they are forced to change the pitch of their chanting. So very strange. So one of the kings in Thailand, King Mongkut, was the one that insisted on monotone type chanting because he thought the monks were getting too melodic in their chanting, and he introduced this idea of monotonic chanting. But it's not an ancient thing, and there's no indication that it was monotonic at the time of the Buddha. But there is indication in the rules of conduct for monks not to embellish or elaborate operatic kind of flourishes on a single note. Because why? Because you distort the ability to understand what's being said. So the Buddha actually wanted the words to be understood. They're not a backdrop for music. The tone changes are just simply to accompany the meaning of the words. So that's the kind of the overall thing. And if you don't like monotonic chanting, I don't blame you. I mean, I don't know how anybody does, but it's so choose your chanting style. I've done it in both. So asevana cha balanang panditanang cha sevana puja cha pujaniyanang etang mangalam uttamang. That would be the Sri Lankan style, and maybe the Thai style would be asevana cha balanang panditanang cha sevana puja cha pujaniyanang etang mangalam uttamang. So these are two different styles, same words. They're both within the rules of not, so what the Buddha didn't want is etang mangalang uttamang. He didn't want elaborate singing, but changing the tone is fine. And most humans find monotone repetition of words rather problematic, and a little change of tone is welcome. Yeah. So we will leave it for today. Our questions and answers, and we will see you next week.